Good afternoon, everyone. I don't even know if I need this, but I'm catching a cold. And at some point, I'm going to lose my voice probably. So, and I'm terrified of closing out the whole thing by putting down this laptop. Oh, it should be good. All right. Good to see everyone. Welcome to the almost quarterly Cattaraugus Hub meeting for nonprofits. Special welcome to our friends from Allegany County who are joining us today, both here in person and online. My name is Larry Sorokas. I consult with the Cattaraugus Region Community Foundation on nonprofit issues with the Hub and so on. And we're looking forward to a really informative, productive, creative discussion today with regard to disaster response, and we've got some great presenters. But before we get into that, just a few announcements on behalf of the Community Foundation and the presenters. If you haven't already noticed, you probably walked by the restrooms. They're just through these doors in the lobby of the Cutco Theater. The refreshments will be available throughout the afternoon on the break and afterwards as you socialize and continue your discussions. Our next program is a lunch and learn on Wednesday, December 3rd at noon, just across North Union Street over at the Hub at 301 North Union, 4th floor of the Lane Place building. The topic is reforms to the state's contracting processes with nonprofits. Doesn't that sound exciting? For those of you that are involved in that, know it's not really exciting. It's terrifying and annoying, and it's going to get better. So Megan Allen, the CEO of NICOM, the New York Council on Nonprofits, is going to be presenting, and we've got flyers here for those of you that may be interested in getting more information about that. If it's almost Thanksgiving, then it's almost the Day of Giving, which is December 2nd this year, just a few weeks away. Locally branded as Cattaraugus Gives. And of course, CRCF plays a major role in putting all of that together. A 24-hour giving marathon from midnight to midnight on Tuesday, December 2nd. We already have 104 organizations registered, but if you're not one of them and would like to be, it's not too late, I say, because I don't have to do anything, but Tyler probably does. So if you want to see Tyler, if you're not already registered and would like to be, it's a great way to make your cause known and also support other causes in the community. There are also yard signs available. Are they here?
Yeah, they're out there.
Okay. Oh, okay, great. So if you're interested in helping to promote Cattaraugus Gives, you can pick up a yard sign. We just ask you to please follow all requisite code enforcement rules for the placing of those signs. Every community has them, and as charitable as Kirk's team is, I'm told there's no funding available to cover fines for code enforcement violations. So be careful with your signage. Also, applications are opened up again for the Ralph Wilson Legacy Funds. That is a fund that's administered by the Community Foundation of Greater Buffalo. We are in that geographic region and are welcome to apply. They have particular interest in the categories of caregivers, community assets, recreation, design and access, and youth sports. And there again, we have handouts available with more information on that. There's also information available to you today on the Elevate Fund, which is a really cool kind of a giving circle format of philanthropy and an excellent way for people to invest in supporting causes that support women in our community. So if you don't know about that or might be interested, take a look at that opportunity. The whole team is here from CRCF today, so certainly they will be able to answer any questions or concerns that you have about any of this. And of course, this is meant to be an interactive discussion today. So at any time, if you have a need or a question, please feel free to raise your hand or stand up or yell or whatever works, and we'll give you the floor. So without any further ado, I'm already late in my timing. We will go on to today's topic. So today's presenters want to help us optimize our ability to prepare for, respond to, and recover from disasters in our communities. Floods, storms, and other catastrophic events can strike a community with little, if any, warning. Comprehensive and inclusive planning can be our best defense, and bringing nonprofit, community-based organizations together with emergency services and municipal leadership is what is commonly now, or maybe not so commonly known, as a COAD, a community organization active in disaster. And we're thinking very hardly about how we are doing that here. This is not in any way to be any pejorative statement about current disaster planning, but maybe a way to take it a step further and make sure that the nonprofit sector is included in the planning, the implementation, and of course the recovery that happens so often without any warning in many cases. So today we're going to hear from a number of people who are experts in this area, who have done this work, who have a strategy that can improve local readiness and mitigate hardships when disaster strikes. And our first presenter is from the New York Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services and the New York Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster. That's a huge business card, and that is Melissa Axley. Melissa is a program administrator with the New York State Division of Homeland Security. She works with disaster recovery and individual assistance section as part of the overall response team. Before joining the disaster recovery team, she spent 8 years with the Office of Emergency Management. Melissa has worked in a variety of disaster-related roles with both private businesses and nonprofit organizations, and we are thrilled to welcome Melissa Axley.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just want to do a real quick sound check because I am not that loud, so I want to make sure people can hear me. Can you guys in the back hear? Yep, okay. Just making sure. There. All right. So as mentioned, I work with the New York State. It's a very long title. Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services. I'm under the Disaster Recovery Individual section, and my group does COAD support for the entire state. So that's the shortened version of everything. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the community organizations active in disaster, what we call a COAD. To give you, I want to start out by giving you just a little bit of background information. I'm not going to go into a full history lesson here, but we work very closely with the New York State VOAD, which is Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster. And that's a part of a national VOAD as well. And just to give you a little background, the national VOAD was founded after Hurricane Camille hit in the Gulf Coast area in 1969. It was a Category 5 storm. You may have heard some of this if you were around when Hurricane Katrina hit, because Katrina hit some of the same areas that Camille had hit. What we found, I wasn't a part of it, I'm not that old yet. But what was found during that time from all the organizations that were involved were that the response was not very organized. There was a lot of duplication of efforts. Some of the agencies had some competition going on out in the field. And the most important part is those who survived the storm, the people that needed the help, struggled to find information of what they could do, what was available to them, how to even start to recover. So a year later in 1970, we had several large response agencies that met to talk about coordinating these efforts. And that's how the National VOAD formed. And really what all of this is a forum for sharing knowledge and coordinating our resources. The one thing that you'll hear us talk about a lot with COADs and VOADs is what we call the 4 C's. So these 4 C's are the foundation of everything that we do. That's cooperation, coordination, communication, and collaboration. And I'm not going to go through and read everything for you because I'm just not that type of a presenter. But keep in mind the 4 C's as we go through talking about the COADs and the VOADs. So you hear me throw out a lot of acronyms. If by chance I forget to explain one of them, please stop me and ask, because in emergency management, we talk in nothing but acronyms. So this is just a little visual here to talk about how the local COADs work with the New York VOAD and the national VOAD. So locally, you're going to be doing what you normally do. You're responding to house fires, you're responding to local events that happen. At some point, hopefully it doesn't happen, but we have to be prepared for it. It may be bigger than you can handle. Not because you don't want to, not because you have anything wrong, but because it's just too big. You need more resources. And at that point, we'd be talking with our partners at the New York VOAD at the state level. If it gets larger than that, think like a Sandy event, then we may be talking to our partners at the national VOAD level as well. So just a little bit of background here. So what really is a COAD, since I start throwing this word out to everybody? It is a community organization active in disaster. It's a nonprofit-led coalition of all the community groups, faith-based organizations that partner with some of the for-profits, government agencies, local agencies. And the purpose of this is to provide effective delivery of relief and recovery services to the communities. Like I said, this is the same thing that some of your agencies may do on a daily basis. If you're already a disaster responder of some sort, this is where you would fit in. It's not a separate, it is a separate entity, but it's the forum for everyone who's involved to be able to coordinate their efforts. So what are some of the benefits of this? This is the sales pitch here. So you want to be able to communicate with your other partners. Do you know who they are? Do you know what they do? Do you know how to get a hold of them? You know, we want to be able to communicate and collaborate, going back to our 4 C's. And we're looking at potentially a local level, state level, and or national level. So having these conversations early, having these before a disaster happens to your community is one of the most important things that we can be doing. It also goes back to community resiliency. So we're able to, if we are better prepared to respond, then we're helping our own communities, our own neighbors, to be able to prepare themselves as well. And it also empowers your local individuals that may be affected by the disaster. If you know what can hit you before it hits, you can prepare for it to some extent. Not everyone's going to be 100% prepared 100% of the time. That would be wonderful, but that's probably not going to happen. But it's giving people the power, the information and the power that they need to be able to make their own decisions. On the back end, it provides coordination of funding, your services, your resources for communities and individuals. So if you have, let's say, 3 agencies that might be able to help with something like feeding after a disaster. If you're not talking to each other, somebody at this table may be covering one area, somebody who's, well, there's nobody at that one, but over here, a little bit more populated, maybe they're working on feeding as well. But if you're not talking to each other, you're going to duplicate efforts. You run into that issue. We don't want to duplicate our efforts. Why? Because most of us don't have enough people, don't have enough funding, don't have enough time, and there's too many people that need our help. So it saves a lot of time, it saves a lot of headache. It also expedites the process. So if we're talking to each other, we're coordinating our efforts, then we can be sending out as one voice what we can do for our own communities. And again, it goes back to reducing the duplication of efforts. So who's involved in this group? That is probably the number one question that I get working with the COADs and VOADs is who should be in the group. There's no hard and fast rule of exactly who is going to be in every COAD because each community is going to be a little bit different. But typically, kind of generic information here, you're looking at your county emergency managers. We're not looking at them to run the group because when something happens, they're going to have enough on their plates. We want them to focus on their response efforts and to be able to coordinate with the COADs and communicate with them so they know what's going on as far as the efforts that the community is making. And you're also plugged into the information that they have in terms of damage. Any information that might need to be shared, can you plug into areas that you may not be aware of? So they may have information they can share with you, and you want to be sharing your information with them as well. Most of your nonprofits, I didn't get a chance to look at who all was here today. I noticed we have Red Cross, we have Salvation Army, we have United Way. Those are groups that would typically help after a disaster as part of their daily role. Even if it's not a part of your daily role, you may play a part in it. Do you have a fund that's available that could help? Do you have volunteers that could help? Do you have, think about logistics. Do you have vehicles that can help haul items from one place to another? So think in terms of not just direct, can I hand you a plate of food, but what are the things that you need in the background? And you're going to need some sort of administrative support in terms of what number are we going to put out there for the public to call if they need help? Who's going to organize that? Who's going to answer those calls and help direct those individuals? Like I said, the logistical portion of it, warehousing space, donations management is a huge, huge undertaking at times. So think not just direct service, but those support services as well. We do have private sector that's involved in part of our COADs as well. And again, we go back to what do they have that we could potentially tap into that partnership to help either get information out or help with the direct services. A lot of your county government agencies will also have some part in the COADs. And you may also look at special interest groups. And when I say special interest, that's a really broad term. Look at your local population. Do you need to have translators? Do you have any special needs groups in the area? Those types of things. So when I say special interest, it could be anything from like a hospice that could help with patient care. It could be a mental health association, something health related. There's a lot of support groups out there for a variety of things. So think of children, pets, those types of things. So this is a very generalized list of what some of our COAD agencies may look like. That doesn't mean that you have to have every one of these. You may or may not have every one of these in your own local community. Note a couple of things here that we're looking at, like your food pantries, which I know is kind of a struggle at the moment with the questions over the federal benefits. Social services. I'm a big pet person. I would have a whole menagerie of animals at my house if my husband wouldn't probably kick me out for it. I would take in every stray within a 30-mile radius. So personally, I'm looking at my pets, and no, I don't have 30 of them in my house, just 4. But what are we going to do with them? Do you have agricultural areas? What are you going to do with your farm animals? So we need to have those types of things addressed as well. Legal aid society, a lot of times people will have legal questions after a disaster occurs, and some of those get very complicated. So that's always somebody good to bring into the fold, or to have somebody who could actually help direct where people would need to go to get the right answers. And don't forget about your Chamber of Commerce, because that's the other one that I want to point out, because they may have those connections in the community, even if they're not able to provide that direct service. And there may be others that you think about as you go through the process as well. Always be thinking, who's missing, who's not here, what voices do we need to add to this group? Excuse me. So one of the tools that we use, and I realize that nobody is going to be able to read that top part of it that's in the colors. We have what we call a membership capacity matrix. You hear me talk about it a lot because we use this tool with pretty much everything that we do. But what we do is we kind of divide it up between preparedness, response, and recovery activities. And really, it's a roster of who's in the community, how do we contact them, who's the appropriate contact, and what do they do? So we have this nice big matrix that nobody can read on anything, even when it's printed on paper. So highly recommend a digital version. But we divide it up, and these are the functions that may happen or may be able to be supported within a COAD. So under preparedness, we're looking at education, planning, training, public education. Teach people what to be prepared for, how to be prepared for it. The whole make a kit when we have winter weather, keep a kit in your car, those types of things. When we look at response, I'm not going to read the whole list to you, but look at some of the things that these are generalized activities that your agency might be able to support. So we're looking at, again, volunteer and donations management. We have groups that will come in and do cleanup after a disaster that will help the homeowner try to, especially after floods, trying to get all of that gunk, all of that trash out of there that's already wet. You want to make sure it doesn't mold, but you've got to get it out of there. And not everybody physically is capable of doing that. Mental health, spiritual care, get your faith-based providers involved with that. And the animal services that I've already mentioned. And when we talk about recovery, what are we looking at? We have what we call disaster case management, where we sit down. We have people that get trained to sit down with the individual and walk them through the whole process. There's always going to be what we use the term unmet needs, which is somebody needs something. We recognize they need it, but it doesn't quite fit in any of the boxes that we check for our different agencies, because all of our agencies will have some sort of requirements. Maybe they don't meet those requirements specifically. Maybe it's a need that doesn't fit a nice, neat little box that's always provided, like feeding and cleaning supplies. But we know it's a need. So then we can have those discussions to say, how do we help this person in the best way? And how do we do that within the system that we create? And some of the things, the temporary and permanent housing, reunification if people get divided up during a disaster, things like the feeding, the clothing, medications, eyeglasses, those types of things are kind of standardized. So this is just to kind of a list to get people thinking about things that maybe in your community that you could support. And you guys feel free to stop me and ask questions if you have any. So what would a COAD structure look like? Often we'll look at having a leadership within the COAD and form a steering committee, which is typically a chair, a co-chair, secretary, treasurer, very similar to any group that you've probably been involved with at some point. A lot of our COADs look at more specific topics as subcommittees. And this is just an example of what you might be able to look at as forming a subcommittee where it's a more specialized group. And that could be anything from access and functional needs to health and mental health, and children, childcare, infants. So that's going to vary based upon the group and what they decide. So in emergency management, if you're not familiar with the terms, we have two terms that we use a lot, which is blue sky days and gray sky days. Are you guys familiar with that? See a few head nods this way and a few this way. So for us, for disaster work, blue sky means normal operations. That there's nothing going on that we can't handle. That's not your normal day. We're not actively responding. So it's the nice, pretty day outside. Then we have what we term the gray sky days. And the gray sky is when something has happened. We're running full steam and we're working really hard. And it's just so kind of we use it kind of like the weather analogy. You know, the blue sky day, everything's nice and pretty. The birds are out singing, sun is out. And then we get hit with the gray skies. So understand the difference when I'm talking about those. But some of the activities that we look at during those blue sky days when we don't have an active disaster going on. A lot of times agencies will present on their own programs just so that we can share what each individual agency does. So sharing that information, knowing what everyone else does is very important. Current events, upcoming events. And it's not always, it doesn't always require a big disaster for it to be a current event. Recently with the questions over the SNAP program, we've had a lot of our COADs have been meeting. It is a disaster for those that it has happened to, but it's not a physical disaster in terms of someone's house blew away in a hurricane. But they are meeting and saying, okay, what programs are out there that maybe not everybody is aware of? How can we support each other, even if it's just information? How can we provide information across the board to anybody who might get a call from somebody within their own community saying, where do I go for help? So they're trying to coordinate those efforts, even though it's not truly that physical disaster of housing damage. You can focus a meeting on one topic. You could do a meeting that's just planning. Let's talk through this. What are we going to do? Agencies that are connected to COAD. COADs are not first responders, but they work with first responders. Could you bring somebody in to talk about their first responder programs? What they do, how far do they go with an individual? What needs they may see? Forming these relationships and these connections is the most important part of the COAD. We talk about doing a lot of planning for disaster events and for long-term recovery. You can also offer some sort of exercise where you have a scenario that you walk through and talk through. trainings, depending upon what's available at that point. And some of our COADs, we do have one COAD that's very focused on preparedness activities. They're not only preparing their community, but they're preparing themselves. Going back to, okay, we have snow on the ground outside today. Do you have a kit in your car? Do you have the things that you need? What do you need if you don't know? So making sure that our membership, as well as our communities, are prepared. Sorry, I'm pushing buttons a little too fast today. So those are just some topics, some ideas. So a part of the COAD is the initial response, and a part of it is your long-term recovery. So if you have a larger disaster that's going to occur, then you're going to start out doing your normal activities, coordinating everything, responding to the disaster. At some point, we'll look at what we term longer term recovery. And that may be a few weeks, that could be months. In some cases, that's years. Hurricane Katrina, they have still not completely recovered. And we just had the 20th anniversary recently. So it can be very long term. So we tend to transition from a COAD into a more formal long-term recovery group at that point. And their purpose really is to connect those survivors with the services that are out there, to be able to make sure that they've got assistance where it's needed, to find out if there are any unmet needs and then discuss how we can hopefully meet those. And also to get them in connection with the groups that will do things like help clean out their houses or clean up debris. So just a little bit of information, and there's a lot more behind this that I could go into. I don't want to overwhelm anyone, and I don't have 3 hours to do this. You probably don't want to listen to me talk for 3 hours. So there's some things that we could get further into at a later date. But I do want to mention them just kind of as part of the overview of what these groups do. And last but not least, we have what we call the state. Well, we have state level and federal level voluntary agency liaisons. They're the VALs. Right now I'm the acting VAL, as we're currently looking for a new VAL to fill the position. And we do have a federal VAL with FEMA, who actually I see his name on the list, Greg Forrester. So he's actually on the call, it looks like. And people say, well, what is your role in this? So this just kind of gives you a little bit of information about what type of support that we can offer. We can help advocate as needed. We can help with the unmet needs. If additional connections are needed, hopefully we can kind of fill in those blanks and say, well, have you talked to this group or this group? Maybe there's somebody in a neighboring county that we're aware of that could come in to help. Do we need to reach up on a state level, or do we need to go further than that? So these are just some of the things that we can help with. We can also help you with understanding the recovery programs that are out there and what they are offering. So this is us. Just to kind of give you a little bit of background there. And I will share these slides because these are all links to different things that if you want to get more information that you can. So if anybody's taking notes, please don't try to write it all down. We'll make sure these get shared. But just to give you an idea, there's a lot of information out there. Part of it's through the state, part of it's through our federal partners with FEMA, part of it's through New York VOAD, some of it's through the national VOAD as well. And it goes through some of the different things that are out there. We have some toolkits available. We have some basic guidelines that we use, a variety of resources that are available in different formats, for long-term recovery, for disaster case management, those types of things. So just know that these are out there, and we'll make sure that you get copies of this if you're interested in keeping up with all of it. And last but certainly not least is some information on the different programs that are available for those that are affected by disasters. We have the Small Business Administration with the SBA that offers very low cost loans to disaster survivors. We do have to apply for an SBA declaration. There is a process for that. There's a minimum amount for that in terms of how many homes are affected and destroyed. But it does open up that funding source. Through FEMA, we have individual assistance, and we also have public assistance that are available. Both of those require a declaration process. So locally, your county can declare a state of emergency if needed. The state can declare through the governor's office a state of emergency. And if more assistance is needed, we can go through the governor's office to make that request to FEMA to get federal funding released. So if you want to know more about that, I would be happy to share that. But it can get a little overwhelming when you start talking about all of the different processes. So I don't want to hit you with everything at once.
So when was the last time you got an IA declaration?
Oh, individual assistance is tough. That's a tough one to get because of the numbers. And when I say numbers, it's numbers of homes affected, but also the total financial amount of damage that we believe has occurred. And I believe the last IA declaration probably was Sandy, I believe, to give you an idea of the scope of it. Public assistance, which focuses more on public buildings, roadways, bridges, things of that nature, is a little bit easier to get. We do get those on a more regular basis. In terms of how easy it is to, or how tough it can be to get a declaration, typically the Small Business Administration has a lower threshold. So we have been able to get quite a few of those. Now, last summer, we had a record number of tornadoes hit throughout the whole state. And we had multiple counties that were able to get assistance through SBA. Because there was a 6-8 week span where we had, I want to say 17 or 18 tornadoes. Most of them hit kind of more towards the North Country, but.
We've got some people coming in on the chat.
Okay. Here we go. Okay. So our friends at FEMA, Greg Forrester, thank you. Hurricane Ida was actually the last FEMA individual assistance declaration. Thanks, Greg. I knew it was one of the hurricanes. I wasn't quite certain. And let's see. Looks like there were some comments about the screens, and I think that was about it. All right, how do I get back to screen sharing here? All right, so that was my last slide anyway, but what What questions do you guys have? Do you have any questions? Or am I just throwing a lot of information at you at the moment? There is not currently a COAD or VOAD in this county. We are looking to actively recruit if anybody is interested. And I think we have our emergency managers who are supportive of the idea, so they would be supportive of us doing that, should you choose to do so.
If you want to, so before you answer a question, can you repeat it? Because you've got the mic and people online can't hear.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The question was whether or not there was an active COAD VOAD in this county, which currently we don't have, but
Anybody here to speak was the one that could be or this is separate thing.
okay. So for those on the line, the question is whether the idea when we were approached to speak, whether it would be the hub would turn into a COAD or to form one separately, correct? Okay. That it probably would be a separate entity, so that we avoid, or it may be, I see a couple of hands going up, that may be the.
That's the idea behind it. Is we're gonna get that education on COADs and the work of COADs so that we can move on to the next step of one in this year. So that's this is the first step.
So the intent is to form, hopefully from at least part of this group. Okay. So kind of a synopsis for those on the line that might not be able to hear. Okay. Any other questions?
Would that intent be to form separate groups for Cattaraugus and Allegany Counties? Or for everyone?
The next presentation goes into how,
All right. So the question was whether that would be just for one county or both counties. And it sounds like the intent is to form with both counties as one group. Okay. Well, if anybody has any questions, feel free to catch me in between the other activities today. Thank you for having me.
There will be a little time at the end of the session, we hope, for further conversation and questions. So, Melissa, thank you very much, and we will look forward to that conversation continuing. I just have to smile when the question comes up: is there a COAD? Well, guess why you're here. I mean, this is all about looking to seek your interest in that. And speaking of COADs, the next presentation is going to be from the Southern Tier COAD, already in existence. Now, I know what you're thinking, or at least I would be thinking, aren't we the Southern Tier? But no, not in New York lingo. We are Western New York. Southern Tier is east of us. And today we are fortunate to have with us Barbara Hubble and Tim Marshall. I'll give you some quick information on them, and they are both going to be here via Zoom, I believe, to present on their COAD. So Barbara Hubble is the Senior Director of Impact with United Way of the Southern Tier. In her role for more than 25 years, she specializes in systems-level strategic planning, community building, grant writing and evaluation, and outcome measurement. She oversees the investment of more than $2.5 million annually in local human services programs. And I love this. She is the administrator of the Dolly Parton Imagination Library of the Southern Tier. Cheryl's writing notes on that, I can tell. Barbara shares a leadership role in the Southern Tier Finger Lakes COAD, helping to plan for and guide local disaster recovery efforts. In her younger years, Barb dedicated 2 decades to being a volunteer EMT and firefighter. She holds a BS in Community and Human Services Management from SUNY Empire State, and an AIS degree in Business Administration from Corning Community College. Tim Marshall is or has been the Director of Public Safety for Steuben County since 2021 and remains in that position. He has been an employee with Steuben County since September of 1997, serving as both the Deputy Director and Director of Emergency Services. Tim is a certified emergency manager with the International Association of Emergency Managers. He holds an associate's degree in fire protection technology and a bachelor's degree in emergency management. Tim has over 40 years of fire and emergency management experience, teaching and lecturing on various topics. He's worked for 16 federal disaster declarations, including such disasters as the World Trade Center attacks on 9/11, severe weather events, and other local emergencies. Tim served as the operations section chief for the county's COVID-19 response, which was the largest activation in county history. A longtime member of the Bath Volunteer Fire Department, he also serves as disaster chairman of the Northern Steuben chapter of the American Red Cross. He served on the chapter's board of directors for 7 years and held the position of board chair in 1995. We've got two very involved and expert people to talk to us about the formation of their COAD.
Well, good afternoon. How's the audio level?
Good.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to share my screen as well. Let's see if we can get there. Hopefully. Bear with me for a second. All right. Should be sharing now. Do you have my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Barb and I are here today to kind of give you an overview of the Southern Tier Finger Lakes VOAD that we've been working on for many, many years here in Steuben County. And our VOAD, or COAD, excuse me, includes Steuben, Chemung, and Schuyler counties. We've been through a couple of good disasters here. So that's kind of the reason why we've been going out and talking a little bit more about what we've done with our COAD and how it's worked for us. So, just to take Melissa's notes here and what she's already covered, basically that the COAD is a collaboration of network of community organizations that come together during a disaster, or even before, as she mentioned, and provide some sort of support and assistance to the communities. It's different than a VOAD. The VOADs are more geared to the federal level and the organizations that work with the states to kind of come together. And I'll talk a little bit more about the coordination between VOADs and COADs as I go into my presentation. But the COADs really focused on those local needs and those local assets that are emphasized during a disaster or an emergency. It really focuses on motivation, but there's also a component there that talks about funding that we need to also consider because a lot can be done within the COAD organization that can't be done within local government. So let's see here. One's advancing, one's not. All right, there we go. So our COAD currently consists of a number of agencies. We actually started, our COAD really started in Steuben County back in the 1998-99 timeframe when we were preparing for Y2K. When I first came to the county, my boss, Mike Sprague, who's now retired, he said, we need a better way of handling the human side of disaster. So he said, let's try to coordinate that and see what we can come up with. So we developed a human needs task force within Steuben County, which basically it was a number of agencies coming together with the Red Cross as well to make sure that we were meeting those human needs side of disasters. So it included, of course, the County Emergency Management Agency, but we also included our 211 helpline, which is run through the Institute for Human Services. The Institute, has various different contracts with different entities, and they have folks throughout the county. So that was a really good fit for aligning the 211 helpline with the emergency management with the start of this. And then we brought in Barb and the folks from United Way, who have other relationships with other human service agencies within the county. A lot of this cannot be done without your CAP program. So your community action program within your community is key because a lot of the times, a lot of the state funding that comes out for human based programs during a disaster come through the CAP program. So it's important to make sure that your community action program is part of this and include them in that. If you're not sure who that is, you can go online, you can do some searching, and you can find that information. And then, of course, other local human service agencies are part of this, including within Steuben County, we use Arbor Housing and Development. They do a lot of our community block grants for us. Catholic Charities, who runs the a lot of the food pantries and food banks within Steuben County. So it's Catholic Charities of Livingston and Steuben. So there's various different community service partners that are part of our COAD here in Steuben. Of course, we work very closely with Melissa and the state partners, our state disaster liaisons, including our state VAL, and we work with our state VOAD. So recently there's been a change in leadership there. And Peter Goditis was the individual from the state VOAD who chaired the state VOAD. Peter was always on our calls when we were having various different things going on within our region. And now we're very, very lucky to have Kelly Dowd involved with that. And I thought I saw Kelly there in the room. So that's awesome to have her, a Western New York person being involved with this type of work. So the value of COADs and emergency management, again, enhancing community resilience through that public-private partnership. As I mentioned before, government can do a lot, but there's a lot of things that government can't do, that we need that private partnership with the nonprofits and other entities to be able to help meet those needs during a disaster and emergency.
Tim, I think that one of the key things that United Way does here with the COAD is move money quickly. In government, you're not going to be able to move money quickly. So part of our role as a United Way with the COAD is we have the mechanism in place for taking donations during a disaster and getting money back out the door quickly to the people who need it the most. So, sorry.
Yep. No, you're great, Barb. Feel free to jump in anywhere that you want as we move along here, or as I have some questions, I might talk with you a little bit about that. But COADs can function in all phases of emergency management, just like Melissa was saying. You can do a lot in preparedness, but you really, where it shines is through the recovery process. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about our disasters that we've had here in Steuben County. But really, a few of those public-private partnerships coming together with a bunch of motivated people can really, really change a community. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along here. So preparedness. During the preparedness phase of emergency management. So emergency management, we work in basically 4 different phases: preparedness, response, recovery, and then mitigation. So in preparedness, that's your blue sky day that Melissa was talking about. That's when we're trying to establish our structure of how our COAD's going to go together, talking about policies and procedures and how things will flow during a response or activation, and what roles will each of the entities take, and whether we're going to have a memorandum of understanding or a memorandum of agreement between the agencies on who's going to do what and how that's all going to flow. During the response phase, when the emergency is happening or ongoing, One of the things that the COAD helps us do is provide rapid intel to the emergency managers. We know what's going on between fire, police, law enforcement, but we don't know what the community really needs until you kind of get that feeling from your residents, from your clients on what it is that they need in their community. So trying to identify those unmet needs, and then like Barb just talked about, that donations management piece is very, very crucial and key. Then we get into really the meat and potatoes of this thing, which is the recovery, focusing on short-term and long-term assistance. Case management is a big piece of what is involved in this, and community aid, specifically pushing out resources, money to the residents of your community. I'll let Barb talk a little bit more about that short and long-term assistance in the case management piece.
So one of the key things that we did specifically in the 2024.
My daughter
in the
loves
tw-
it.
I'm not sure.
Just showing a
who's-
bit more interest. He likes looking at it. I'm not sure he likes being out in it.
Somebody's on mute. Somebody needs
I
to
think
mute.
it's Carol.
Not you, it's me with the system being just a little slow.
Oh, that's okay.
So he was upset the other day. We wouldn't let him go out play. He was like,
Carol,
"Dad,
can you mute your
Oh,
mic,
you haven't been
please?
in since September. You can come in once a month.
Carol, can you,
Okay, so yeah, you're absolutely eligible.
let me see if
So
I
you
can
can
mute
get
her.
your paper and plastic and we'll get your cold stuff out. Okay?
There we go. Okay. Forgot where it was. One of the
Right.
key things we did in the 2024 flood was the assignment of case management, and another role that United Way plays. And I know you have a couple of United Ways in the room today. We facilitate the case management piece. So working with our community partners that have the case managers, making sure that they're all meeting, all talking, and we included them as right from the start, day one, when we activated the COAD, so that the case managers are working with the intake from 211, the data that comes in through the intake form, and they assess what the needs are, the unmet needs of the families that they're working with. And we, every single day on a COAD call, talk to Tim and his folks on the ground about what the needs are. I'm not sure what else you wanted me to talk about there, Tim.
No, that's good. That's good. So again, the next phase of the emergency management phases is mitigation. And how do we stop a disaster from happening? Well, we really can't do that. But after a disaster or emergency or a response from the COAD happens, we need to look at having after action reviews and to really talk about what happened, where we did well, where we didn't do well, things that we can do to make things better in the future. Look at those AARs and support those after action reviews that emergency management is having so that we can really focus on the next time and doing it better. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. Resilience funding, looking at where we can boost our funding mechanism to have some money in queue so that we can be prepared for that. And then training, of course, making sure that your COAD individuals are trained in that emergency management talk that Melissa talked about earlier, all those acronyms and things that we use that you might not know like the emergency managers do or first responders, but things that you really need to learn in that aspect. And that was a big one for us, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we move on. So again, focusing on collaboration, cooperation between the agencies opposed to command and control. So as emergency managers, we really focus more on the command and control piece. First responders do. But the COAD really focuses on collaboration and cooperation between entities and agencies. It's not about who's in charge. It's about helping the community. So development of a memorandum of understanding or memorandum of agreement between the agencies is important. yeah, I've seen COADs do it either way. Some have more formalized MOAs or MOUs. Others do not. Others keep it much more loose so that they can flex and move on the fly. Standard operating procedures, having some written procedures in place on who's going to do what and how it's all going to happen is going to be important to the goal of the operation. A critical role is that public-private partnerships, and I'll let Barb talk a little bit about those private partnerships between agencies like Home Depot and Lowe's and Walmart and Wegmans and business and corporations, and how critical that is to the funding side of things and to getting the community engaged.
Right. We obviously, as a United Way, we have relationships in the community with all of the area businesses and corporations, and they all want to give when there's a disaster. We are the conduit for that to happen. But also your retailers, both large and small, want to contribute what they can, and it might not be monetary in some instances. Like Isaac Heating and Air Conditioning is really like on the front lines when we have a flood disaster in the area, and they work with the COAD to prioritize which homes they go to first, et cetera. Your big box stores like Home Depot, like Lowe's, if they have materials that are sitting in the back room, for instance, flooring, they have 26 cases of flooring. Can somebody use it? Of course they can. We tend to make those connections back and forth. But also I wanted to talk a little bit more about the case management. One thing that we did really, really well in 2024 was assigning a case manager, an individual case manager to each flood victim, to each family, instead of that family who has been traumatized by the disaster having to go through 17 different agencies to get 17 different types of help. They had one case manager that was their touchstone throughout. Whenever they had a need or they just wanted to talk, they called their case manager, who then managed all of those 17 different things for that family, which, folks, I'm telling you, is a game changer. When you're planning, that should be part of your planning. I'm all for that.
So the key functions here, like Melissa had talked about, is meeting those unmet needs. What is it that the community needs, and how do we meet those needs? And what agencies can come to the table to bring resources to help assist with this process? Role in supporting vulnerable populations. This is really crucial and key because a lot of the times in a disaster situation, those underserved groups become much more underserved. If you think about some of our preparedness measures are to try to encourage individuals and residents to have 72 to 96 hours of sustainability before, to try to make it through the first 3 to 5 days in a disaster emergency before help arrives. But think about that single mom who, works on a McDonald's salary trying to feed her, 2 kids, and she has to go to the food pantry, quite often for what she needs. How does she build that 72, 96 hour sustainability to have food and water and extra cash on hand and those things that we encourage people to have an emergency kit? A lot of our underserved populations are just never going to have that. So how do we reach those underserved groups? Advocating for that equity and in the recovery process. That's really crucial of what the COADs can really help do, filling those gaps left by traditional governmental response. Because as we talked about, disaster declarations come, but they're not always disaster declarations that individual family members or residents will receive. And I'll talk a little bit about that here in the next couple of slides, I believe.
Also important to note that we have Office for Aging as part of the COAD.
Yeah, absolutely. Office for the Aging, and those are key resources that are important to what we do. So again, additional COAD roles, boosting that preparedness and recovery aspect of things. The need for committed partners in time, in investment. This is crucial because one of the things that we found with our COAD was, we went a period of time without any disasters. And we didn't have, people kind of fell off the radar screen because it wasn't at the top of their plate. And then people changed and people moved on, and then new people didn't come to the COAD meetings because they didn't know what it was. But trying to keep those agencies engaged is important, and making sure that we have committed partners who have the time to be able to keep the COAD moving forward and keeping those players engaged. Like Barb had talked about, fiduciary partners are very, very important to have as part of the COAD. Both informal and formal structure, it doesn't matter which direction you go, but just make sure that you have a fiduciary partner that's in place. And we'll talk a little bit more about Tropical Storm Fred and Tropical Storm Debbie here in a minute, and how important our partnership with United Way as a fiduciary partner really, really helped us in that. It just basically having a COAD leads to a stronger outcome before a disaster happens. Just coming to the table and sitting down and talking about this is really your first step forward into the next disaster response capability. And knowing that, hey, we've got a bunch of partners that were in a room that were willing to help and come to this meeting, and how can we engage them now if the disaster happens? So as I talked about, we want to look at a brief case study here for what happened in Steuben County during Tropical Storm Fred and Tropical Storm Debbie. Tropical Storm Fred occurred in 2021, and then Tropical Storm Debbie in 2024. So August 18th of 2021, Tropical Storm Fred hit. We had in excess of about 7 inches of rain in the number of hours, with some pre-rain that had occurred beforehand. So we were pretty wet to begin with, and then you dump 7 inches of rain on top of that, and then we had a major problem. During that period, we had no defined roles for the COAD members, no established intake form. We lacked critical information that really caused a lot of repeat calls to residents, and that frustrated them. Delayed data release, communication issues between the public and caseworkers, the terminology issues, all of the things that you would think could go wrong kind of went wrong with this. And I'll let Barb talk a little bit more about how all of this kind of flowed for the community service partners.
So the case management piece, as it says here, was disconnected and often duplicative. So when those families, remember I said in 2024, well, we'll talk about that in a second, we did this much better. But in 2021, when the families called 211 helpline, which was the central point of entry, they were referred to the various different helping agencies in the community, and they had to jump through 17 hoops to get 17 different sources of assistance. So the case managers in that case were not talking to each other. There was no memorandum for sharing information about flood victims. And really, people were falling through the cracks because there was no feedback loop. We didn't know who was helping who. And the referrals, especially for places like mental health, they weren't happening, and we needed to do this better. So, Tim, did you want to talk about the material things and the volunteers?
Yeah, and just on the mental health piece, don't forget your caseworkers. Your caseworkers are sitting here listening to these stories from these residents that have lost everything, and it can affect them as well. So make sure that you're taking care of your own people with the mental health side of things. We brought in local volunteer teams to come in and provide some support. Those folks were on the ground, but it was random. Some were organized, some were not. The VOAD, state VOAD helped us with organized volunteers from agencies like the Southern Baptist and the United Methodists. We had a lot of help from Mennonite Disaster Services. So there's a lot of church groups that do this for a living, or volunteer this type of response capability to help clean up during floods and emergencies. And you can work on bringing those folks in using your state partners. So we did do that, but we also had a lot of random folks that showed up. Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, sports teams, college students. Some were organized, some were not. So we had some problems with that. Donation of material items was problematic. And part of the problem we had was the community as itself, the individual residents of the community of Woodhull came together and started the donation center. They took their town hall. They had basically an old gymnasium that they made over in their town hall to a donation center. And you could go in there and you could get just about anything that you would want to get at Walmart. We actually called it the Woodhull Walmart during that time. You could get baby supplies and diapers and cleaning supplies to clean up your home. You could get food. You can get clothing. There was even donations of corn and zucchini and bottled water. But the problem was after about 2 days, they were completely overwhelmed with people bringing them stuff, because anything that people wanted to get rid of, they would bring to Woodhull to the donation center, whether it was good or not. They would bring it and dump it off there, and then they had to sort it and try to figure out what they were going to do with it. So after a couple of days, we had to tell people, don't bring any more stuff. The biggest thing that is important with a local disaster is cash. You want to have, yeah, cash is king. That's right. So you want to have that cash to be able to provide that to your fiduciary partner, and then have them distribute that out to the residents, who then can go and buy the things that they need. We'll talk a little bit more on how we fix this in the second disaster. There was a limited understanding of FEMA assistance. So Melissa just talked a little bit about FEMA assistance. So in FEMA, there is basically two sides of FEMA disaster assistance. There's public assistance, which is for basically local governments and nonprofits. It's to replace your roads, your bridges, your infrastructure, those type of things. That's public assistance. With public assistance, we have to meet a per capita criteria. Ours was during Tropical Storm Fred, ours was just under or just around $400,000. We had $25 million worth of damage. And so we met the criteria for a FEMA disaster declaration for public assistance, roads, bridges, infrastructure. We had a school that was completely washed out during this disaster, which was, again, millions of dollars worth of damage. But when the public hears the president has declared a disaster declaration for Steuben County, they think FEMA's coming in with a checkbook and writing them checks and giving them money. And that doesn't happen unless you receive individual assistance. And like Melissa said, that's a whole nother bear in itself, because you have to look at the number of insured, uninsured, how many properties were affected per capita, but also what's the state's capabilities of being able to respond and provide assistance. There's a lot of things that you have to look at with individual assistance, and you rarely ever get individual assistance. So making sure that your COAD folks know the difference between public assistance and individual assistance, and making sure that they communicate that to the public, because the public hears FEMA and they think they're coming in and giving them a check, and it's not going to happen that way. So that's very, very important to know that language. So we had really no long-term recovery plan at that point, including how we were going to support this disaster for the long term, because this was a long-term disaster. And it took us months to get through a lot of the processes that we went through in this. And we had limited understanding of how long it was really going to take and how long these caseworkers were going to be engaged. You want to talk a little bit about that, Barb, or?
Absolutely. I think that, and I'll just say quickly, because I know we're running behind schedule, that we're all doing this off the side of our desk and we all had a day job. And one of the things that we did not think about was how long will this long-term recovery take? And I will tell you now, for the disaster from 2024, August of 2024, we are still getting requests for assistance 18 months later. So it goes on and on and on, and we needed to have a plan for that.
Right, exactly. And if you think about, this disaster happened in August, we were waiting for FEMA disaster assistance all the way through till February before we got the SBA. And you got to think about cold weather setting in and not having the funds to be able to manage that. So you've got to really work on that. All right, moving along. So how do we fix this? So Barb, you want to talk about what United Way did in this?
We actually got a grant from United Way Worldwide, and we hired consultants from Niagara County who are experts in long-term disaster recovery. And they brought all the folks together, did a great SWOT analysis. Anybody who had an instrumental role in the recovery efforts, they did individual interviews. They gathered all the data about where were our stress points and how could we do this better, and helped us develop a response and recovery plan. And we had planned a tabletop exercise to test the plan, to poke holes in the plan to see what would work and what wouldn't. And as we were planning that tabletop exercise, then we had Tropical Storm Debbie, and there it is, and it blew on up through, and here we were again, 3 years, almost to the day. We were then immersed in another flash flood disaster. And in some ways, this one was worse than the one in 2021. So go ahead to the next slide, Tim.
Yep. Go ahead, Barb.
So, and what was different for us this time is that we had the plan. We had a plan for how do we do this step by step by step. And in the short term, in the intermediate, and then again for the long term, how do we do this? We turn the page every day. What do we do today? What do we do today? Go ahead, Tim. We were, as a COAD, much more organized because we all worked together on the plan. What is everybody's role? What are we going to do? The universal intake, regardless of where they were coming in, we had community events where there were case managers sitting and taking information from people. We had 211 helpline as the central point of entry. But regardless of where those victims came into the system, we had a central intake form that all deposited in the same spreadsheet. We had a release. Can we share your information with other members of the COAD for the purposes of getting you help? And all but one person said yes. We had 250 families that came through that intake process. One family said, no, I don't want you to share my information. And we honored that. But everybody else, game changer, we were able to share that information amongst the case managers, the people on the ground. Comprehensive data was in real time. We could synthesize the data that was coming in from the intake and give it back to Tim and the first responders on the ground so they knew what was coming in, who were the victims, what was the scale of the disaster in real time. We were much more familiar, those folks like me who had never worked a flood disaster before, with the language that the folks on the ground were using. And as Tim just mentioned, it is absolutely key to have that better understanding of the FEMA process. So we don't have people sitting on a pile of debris waiting for FEMA to come in and write them the check. Go ahead. And central to 2024, the big thing for us was Governor Hochul coming to town and saying, there's money available to help you here. So we had each victim family was eligible for up to $50,000 in state funding, depending on the degree of their damages, and they had to have help. They had to have a case manager that walked them through that process. But again, what was pivotal for us was having that one case manager be the touchstone for every family, so they didn't have to jump through the flaming hoops on their own. The material donations, the shoes and the used clothes and the used washer and dryer, we handled that through a Facebook page. So we had a community give take page that served the purpose of the Woodhull Walmart that happened in 2021. So we didn't create another disaster in and of itself. Better coordination of the cases between emergency management and human services, where we had the case managers at the table from day one. We were able to say, Mrs. Smith needs this today. Can you send one of the volunteer teams over to her home for the rip, tear, and muck out? And we coordinated that every single day with the first responders on the ground. And the referrals, what we hadn't thought of prior to the disaster was when you have farmers, agricultural land, Department of Ag is one of the referrals that we make. And we brought in Cornell Cooperative Extension to be part of the referral mechanism, and mental health served as a receptionist at some of our community events. So they were talking with families as they came through the door. And I will reemphasize this as long as the day, that one person handles the family. So they don't have to go to 17 different places. They know their case manager. They trust their case manager. They work with them individually. So just keep that in mind. That's a best practice for us. Go ahead,
So
Tim.
so basically, kind of close things out, your COAD really is a force multiplier for the emergency manager. It helps us to be able to focus on the emergency response piece, while the COAD is really helping us look at the short-term and long-term recovery process. It's most valuable, through the recovery process, but you can impact the community in all phases of emergency management, like I talked about. We started small here. We started with just Steuben County with the Human Needs Task Force, and we broke up into some subcommittees, and then eventually we transitioned into the COAD that it is now, and included Chemung and Schuyler counties. So we make sure that the whole community really is part of this. If an emergency manager takes the time to establish a COAD within the local program, it'll benefit the whole community and provide some needed help to that emergency manager during the crisis. So like Melissa talked about, your local emergency management is part of the key process of being engaged with this COAD and making sure that you have a role to play here. So, look around you today in the room, look online and see who's missing, who's not at the table that we need to bring to the table here. That's really what the COAD is. It's about bringing those resources to the table. And last, to kind of close with some of these pictures from our flood. This is what we were dealing with. Homes that were completely in shambles from floodwaters that ravaged through these communities. This is actually a road that goes through here. You couldn't get there because of all the downed trees and all of the debris from the streams that had flooded that roadway. Of course, I don't have to explain this one. This house was completely destroyed and this family lost everything. The debris that you get from the mud and the muck that comes out. It's overwhelming for these residents. It's overwhelming for the communities. And we're going to be dealing with this for years. Like Barb said, the cleanup and recovery is still ongoing and will be ongoing for many, many years here in Steuben.
And understanding clearly that this is a trauma, a shared trauma.
Yeah, it is. It's a shared trauma between the residents, the community, And again, I want to reiterate that we didn't really focus on it before, but Tropical Storm Fred and Tropical Storm Debbie both hit the same region of our county. They hit the same area again. So the first time Tropical Storm Fred came through, it hit the towns of Woodhull and Canisteo and Troopsburg, and all of those areas were hit the second time with Debbie. You know, some of the community, we saw the community step up, and we saw neighbors coming together and helping each other. And that was very beneficial that we had that experience, you know, to go by and to learn from it.
Jasper School that was destroyed in 2021 was getting ready to reopen in 2024 when Debbie hit and the school was destroyed again.
So what questions do you have? And I'll probably need somebody at the mic to repeat the questions for us if you have any questions in the room.
Tim, it's John Ebert from Assemblyman Semplinsky's office. Who led the formation of the Southern Tier COAD? Who was basically the prime motivating factor behind it and brought everybody together?
The question is, who led the formation of the COAD and who was the primary mover that made it happen?
So again, back in 1997, when I came to the county, it was following some devastating floods, the 1996 floods, and then a severe snowstorm that we had here in the county. And my boss, Mike Sprague at the time, said, you know, we need to do human side of disaster better. So we formed Human Needs Task Force, which really was based out of the county emergency management office, but it included county social services, mental health, office for the aging, mainly county agencies. And then we reached out to, of course, the Red Cross, Salvation Army played part in that at early stages. And then the Institute for Human Services was involved. And then it just kind of, as things evolved, the Institute for Human Services, who oversees our 211 program, really kind of took the lead because it really was, you know, we needed something other than government to run this. So that's why the Institute stepped forward and took the lead on it, and then United Way jumped in. So right now, the way our organization is kind of loosely formulated is we kind of have an executive committee, which is made up of the Institute for Human Services, Emergency Management, and United Way. We're really the three that kind of lead that. But on top of that, we also have our community action program, which is Pro Action of Steuben and Yates, Catholic Charities of Livingston and Steuben, and then Arbor Housing and Development, which is our community block grant organization that does a lot of the housing need issues within the county. So those are our primary agencies, but we work with many other agencies as well.
Thank you. Anyone else?
More case managers, are they volunteers? How do you designate them? How many do they need?
Can you talk a little more about case volunteers? How and who coordinated the case managers?
So you're breaking up just a little bit, but I think you're asking about case management. Barb, you want to cover that?
When we, in 2021, on the intake for families, 211 made referrals as they would normally do through 211 to places that may be able to help. And families were individually calling each of our normal folks on the ground, Pro Action, which is our community action agency, Catholic Charities, Salvation Army, Red Cross. They would individually call on their own to all of these organizations. What we did differently in 2024 was include the case managers from these human service organizations at the table on the COAD from day one, so that they knew what was going on the ground. And when folks came through the central intake, based on the level of need and the expertise from these various organizations, and we worked primarily with the Community Action Agency, Pro Action, with Catholic Charities, and with Arbor Housing and Development. Mainly Arbor Housing and Development did a lot with the state grant because of their expertise in that area. But we would assign them as they came through the portal to a case manager. And we met every single day to say who's got what needs, what do they need on the ground, how can we coordinate with first responders on the ground. So it was really United Way facilitated the meeting of the minds, if you will. And if a family needed something that a Catholic Charities couldn't provide, Catholic Charities picked up the phone to call Arbor or to call ProAction, and the case managers talked and jumped through those hoops so that the families did not have to. Does that help?
And let me just add really briefly that the state grant came through Housing and Community Renewal through the state agency, and Arbor Housing and Development was the applicant for the county to that program. So they were the primary lead agency for most of the housing issues and that $50,000 eligibility for each resident homeowner.
Which, if you're having to rebuild your entire home, has nothing. So it's more than we had in 2021, but it's not enough.
And unfortunately, it's more than what you get from FEMA individual assistance, because FEMA individual assistance is typically about $35,000 for, and then through SBA, you can get an SBA, that's a low interest loan. So through SBA, you can do more. However, it's a loan program over a 30-year payback for 3 to 4%.
And be thinking about, as you're forming your COAD, one of the things that we learned and actually did very well in 2024, if somebody loses everything in their home, they are not going to be able to locate the deed to that property. So the county administrator and the county clerk work together with the COAD to loosen the restrictions for how you get copies of those critical paperwork, so you can apply for state funding. So think about that as well. Different ways that you can work with different entities.
Laura, did you have a question?
What program or software do they use to centralize all those intake forms?
What program or software do you use to centralize all of those intake forms?
Believe it or not, it was as simple as Microsoft Teams.
Okay.
It was Microsoft Teams, and we set up the spreadsheet with the questions and using our planning in the middle, a lot of the questions that funders would need, and that if they were eligible for FEMA by any stretch of the imagination, we would have that information on file instead of having to call people back to get information. Very simple, very quick, and I'd be happy to share that with you.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else?
The nice thing about that process too is we identified during the intake process, if we identified something new, they could just change it on the fly. They just added that question in there. For instance, when we identified we had a lot of farms that were affected, there were a couple of questions added to request information about your farm and the number of animals and what type of farm you had. That was all information that the State Department of Ag and Markets was looking for in the U.S. Farm Service Agency. So we would grab that information as part of our intake and then feed that information right into those organizations as well.
Another question?
They mentioned the need for long-term staffing, that they hadn't anticipated that. So where would that go? Would that be through the 211, the United Way, some other agency? How would you?
I guess to summarize, we're wondering about how did you manage the need for long-term staffing and who actually took the lead on that?
So I think that's still a work in progress, if you would agree with me, Tim.
Yes.
And part of what we learned in the planning process between the two disasters is that that's something that the COAD needs to actually put in the plan. Who can do intake at public events? So in order to take the information in this form, you don't necessarily need a trained case manager because the questions are pretty simple. But when it comes to connecting people with the resources that they need and helping them fill out the forms, you need a trained case manager for that. So thinking in the blue sky times about what would that look like over the long term? What does United Way staffing look like if I have to go away for a month? Who is going to be sitting at my desk doing what I do? So every organization that's part of the COAD should be thinking about what's our bench strength here and how do we build that bench strength?
Yep, continuity of operations is key. But one of the things that we identified is okay, so we're working with Catholic Charities of Steuben and Livingston. Can another Catholic Charities organization come in and provide their caseworkers to help support the caseworkers that are from this region? So can we reach out to another community action program somewhere else within the region to be able to bring those supporters in? Again, in this disaster, Chemung County, Schuyler County, they were not hit like we were. So could we go to Chemung and Schuyler and ask some of their human service agencies to provide us some caseworkers that work unilaterally with them on other programs that they could speak the same language and try and provide that help? And that's what we're working on now.
Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you, Tim and Barb, very much for all that information, and congratulations on all the work that you put in to make this work. We are happy to have you as a neighbor, and I hope we can count on you again if we have questions down the road.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I'll share this PowerPoint with Susan so we have it, so you can have it.
Thank you very much. We worked right through the break, but I will just say, if you feel the need to get up, grab a bite to eat, or use the restroom, we're going to keep moving through the presentation. And I would be remiss if I forgot to tell you that we also have 3 tickets to the St. Bonaventure basketball game tonight that will go to actually whoever goes to see Kirk first, I guess. So there are 3 here, and there was no stampede. So, we realize in having this conversation that we're not starting at square one. There's an awful lot of work that's been done in terms of emergency services and emergency management. And we're at this point, as we kind of come toward the end of the presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening now and what is it that we can build upon. And we're fortunate to have Scott Golden with us today. He's the director of the Office of Emergency Management for Allegany County, a colonel in the New York Army National Guard, currently serving as the deputy commander of clinical for the Medical Readiness Detachment. He has a deep background in military medical operations and emergency management, including 4 years as a deputy commander of Medical Command and deployment for Operation Noble Eagle and Operation Enduring Freedom. He holds a master's degree in emergency and disaster management from American Military University, along with extensive specialized military training. Before becoming the director of the Allegheny County OEM, he spent 4 years with New York State as a disaster assistance representative, specializing in securing FEMA public assistance grant funding for disaster recovery, working with multi-million-dollar projects and multiple concurrent disasters, which build upon 16 years of increasing responsibility with his employment in New York State. Please welcome Scott Golden.
All right, well, thank you. Thanks for inviting me here. Sometimes they say tough act to follow. At least if it wasn't necessarily right after lunch, you kind of get a little sleepy and stuff. I realize we're on a time constraint, but don't let that scare you up there. I loaded up a lot of extra stuff. So the focus will be on, actually we could start out with 33311. So the focus is going to be on AFN, that AFN file up there. You heard Melissa earlier talk about the 4 C's in emergency management. Very important. Again, reinforce those. The other presenters talked about, the different phases of a disaster, preparedness, mitigation, response, recovery. And as mentioned on my bio, I spent a lot of time in recovery. And the importance of that, and you've heard about some of the timelines about recovery. It can take up the year. Thank you. It can take up the years at times in the recovery phase, depending on the size and scope of disasters. So real quick before I get into plans, because my primary focus as a presenter today was about some plans. I wanted to pass the word if you haven't heard about this already. So there's a couple programs New York State's been pushing out, and I've been doing this, Melissa, too, as part of my spiel. So there is a New York alert, and you can sign up for that on their site. That is the most basically. I have another page which I can pull up for you. So the state had came out and said, well, we got quite a few people subscribed and signed up for that, for like mostly weather related alerts. There also are in-depth stuff on like sex offender notifications in your community if you want to subscribe to that or not. So that's like the full thing. So that's New York Alert. They noticed that there was a pretty good response, but then there was still a gap. They want to try to get information out to folks quickly. And a lot of times nowadays, pretty much everybody has a cell phone, right? So what they came up with is a little bit of like a scaled down version. So it's 333-111, 333-111. The instructions are on here. I could probably zoom in, and again, I can provide this afterwards to distribute to the group if you don't already have it. It's pretty simple. It works pretty well, I think. So you can subscribe specific to your county. So you just text the name of your county. And I think it's right up here. I don't believe it's case sensitive. So if you're in Cattaraugus County, you just text that, and bam, it'll sign you up for the weather alerts, emergency alerts, stuff like that. So it's a pretty good program. I just wanted to share that with you guys. First up. All right. What's that?
It says not to include the word county.
Right. Thank you. Do not include the word county. So just put the name of the county. Yeah, thank you. And again, I don't believe it's case sensitive. I think there is a thing there somewhere. I'm at an angle. My vision's still pretty good, but I believe it is not case sensitive. Yeah, right here. Yeah, I do recall reading that. I did a little rehearsal before. So it is not case sensitive. I should probably, again, I can share these things with everyone afterwards as well. All right, let me figure out. Is it let me pull up the next one, sorry. So as far as the so these are a couple things I put together. So let me preface by saying I took over for emergency county manager director in mid-June of this year. So I've been on a job for a few months, not quite in full stride yet, but we're getting there. Some of the gaps I noticed, again, a big focus on preparedness. I'd rather try to have our residents prepared and aware as possible. So that's one of my focuses, right? So before things get super bad, if we can prevent some things from happening, and because too often you hear, "Oh, I wasn't aware of that," surprisingly, and hey, sometimes I live under a rock too. It's fascinating. Some people just don't know certain things. So very generic but effective. So there's your National Weather Service, and that's out of Buffalo. That's what we use. Our county has a media page. We also do a separate one for Facebook. And again, that just helps get the word out. We have several subscribers on there. I don't recall the numbers. I think 1,000 and some, which isn't bad because the demographics, not want to bore you with the demographics of our county, but there's roughly 47,000 people there. So this is really good because you can click into there. It's updated. That is the authority source rather than, oh, I just heard it from Scott. Well, he has some street credibility, emergency manager guy. But it's right there, has the radar, lifetime. You can type in your zip code. So I just put together just a quick one page. Bam, there it is. This is good stuff. There's the links. I mentioned New York Alert. That's that one. And the notifications for New York Alert, I can kind of scroll down here. Those are the ones for that. And I'm at a bad angle here. Let me turn this a little bit, maybe. Just use this to scroll down. No? Can I scroll down with this or no? Turn mouse. On the side. I can't see it. I might have bad angle. Sorry. Okay, there we go. I can't really see it. So this is New York alert. Again, this is the full robust version, basically. You get the weather, amber alerts. Pretty much everybody gets those pushed anyways, I believe. So those are the specifics of that. Earthquakes, we do get them here. Typically the Richter scale, it's pretty low key. It's not like, California and such, but we do get them. Marine weather alerts. You saw a few of those out last week in the Buffalo, Rochester area along the Great Lakes. And then the SORAs, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, so all that stuff up there is for the big program. And then the scaled down one, which I showed you the flyer for the 33311. So again, if you don't already have it, I encourage you to subscribe. The nice part is you can, if you get sick of it or something, or like this isn't working well, not for you, just this text stop, I believe, not case sensitive again, and they go away. So it's a pretty good program. I jumped on with it. Some other counties, I think, use other additional alert systems. Allegheny County actually has one that's called Code Red. They actually pay for that one. So when I got there, I'm like, hey, I'm trying to be cost effective. And I also recently took the training for IPAWS, which is the Integrated Public Alert Warning System through Everbridge. And that's a very nice thing New York State pays for. And they offer that free to the county. So I'm like, hey, I'm there because we have to watch budgets and such, and but still try to be effective. So I thought those were good things I wanted to grab up. So thanks. All right. Next thing we'll do is we'll jump into AFN. We touched on some of the stuff earlier, and that stands for access to functional needs. And we'll go with the plan. Thank you. All right, perfect. Okay, so I just want to start with, this is a draft plan. It's not approved yet. I like the Army writing style. I took that skill set over into the civilian world, brevity. I don't want to have something that someone's going to use as a doorstop. Having a super detailed plan sometimes is necessary. Other times, let's do an 80% solution, and the rest is adjusting, right? Not a rest. The rest is adjusting and flexibility. So try to keep it real basic. And again, you want it short so that way people will actually remember most of it and can execute the plan when the time comes, versus typing up a college paper dissertation 50 pages long that, I'm like, hey, where's the executive summary, right? So anyway, without further ado, access and functional needs. This was, it's very new. And it's pretty much stemmed out of the California wildfires. Earlier presenters prior to me today talked about AARs, right? That's something we do in the civilian world, and I've done it for 29 years in the military, after action reviews, right? So you look at the mission, the 5 W's of the mission, what worked well? Hey, honestly, it's pretty hard to take a look at yourself, be critical. What didn't work so well? What can we do better next time to make it better? Save lives, people, property, stuff like that. So as far as the AFN coming out of California wild, unfortunately, a lot of people perished in those incidents. They took a deep dive into that. They said, hey, who were some of the folks that perished there? They started doing some deep studies. And of course, a lot of the folks were mobility impaired, maybe had speech deficits, hearing, stuff like that. They needed adaptive equipment and such. Maybe they had it, maybe they didn't. Maybe their simple as their batteries died in their hearing aids and stuff. So then you get the alert messages out. So again, I know I'm under a time constraint, but basically that's where AFN came out. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. As unfortunate as it was. So again, that's a more local impact. The storm in Buffalo, fairly recently, where a lot of lives were lost up there due to the conditions. So again, taking critical look and then trying to come up with some plans to how to identify, without labeling the population, but to identify them and say, hey, reach out. How can we meet these folks where they're at? Get them maybe the piece of adaptive equipment they need. interpreter skills, be able to put alert warnings and such in their language, preparedness, things like this. So that way that they're ready. Again, this is the plan. I'm not going to read it verbatim because we all know how to read. Again, it's still in draft, and I'm trying to look for the icon. There we go. It's tough on the side of this here, but there we go. All right. So, purpose and authority, Article 2 Bravo, New York State Executive Law. We want to do the maintenance on the plan annually. There's definition. Basically, I'm going to key in on this part here. If you guys see the cursor, the icon. So the CMIS principle, again, we use a lot of acronyms, as I think Melissa mentioned earlier and some of the other presenters in emergency management world. So it's communication, maintaining health, independence, sport safety, and transportation. And again, the thing is, we're trying to identify things people need to keep themselves healthy and safe and informed. Here's the scope. I am gonna read this part because it is important. So some of the assumptions: power, electric power, communication, and transportation systems may be disrupted. And I was almost going to change that word maybe to very likely or probably or will be, because typically that's what gets really hit hard in disaster, right? And it impacts everybody. But again, lower socioeconomic status, or if you have an unmet need, those populations are impacted worse, right? And they're a lot of times victims, as we heard from the example local from Buffalo snowstorm. So we want to try to keep that from reoccurring. Not all AF individuals are known to agencies in advance. That's another key point. So I've been working with our county to kind of, I pretty much know where a lot of stuff's at. It's a small county. So you have like your nursing homes identified where there's going to be some mobility issues, medical issues. So God forbid you had to do like an evacuation due to a flood. You at least have some enumeration, right? Some numbers and some planning factors so you can at least have a good start. We also have individuals with disabilities. And again, their staff do a great job. Been in communication with those folks. And then something I didn't put in here yet. I recently met with SPCA in the county because we don't want to forget about our pets. And often in emergencies, disasters, the pets get forgotten about, and they're basically like a family member. You don't want them to lose their life either. And unfortunately, if you're separated from your pets due to like you have to go stay at a shelter or something, there's certain rules. A lot of times the shelters won't take the pets. And I know they're like a family member. A lot of times people are freaking out about it for a good reason. I'm a pet owner too. So we want to have, be mindful of that and try to help, again, meet them where they're at, meet these needs before they become a big problem, become a mess. So again, other thing, not all the AFN individuals are known to agencies in advance. So that's again, a good assumption to plan for, to try to kind of beef up some of your assets, just to be prepared. And then a big one, I think I started to mention this, in some cases, it may be better to support individuals in their home versus evacuating them. So you size up the situation, say, it's like something with I'll do something real basic and simple. Power outage. In our county, we have worked with OFA, Office for Aging, Anita Medicine's my neighbor next door, and then Department of Health. They have those mobile battery banks, and those things they're pretty robust. They'll power up a lot of like some of the basic oxygen concentrators, maybe a CPAP machine, stuff like that for 24 hours or more. They're pretty cool. They're pretty powerful. They do checks. They keep them charged. So maybe we can just provide one of those to a family or individual instead of having to take them out of their home. Now they're not totally displaced. Does that make sense? So it's just trying to get a little bit of forward thinking. I wish we had a billion of them, can like, hey, you get a car, but use them sparingly and identify to who can get the best juice out of them. And trying to be fair and equitable, of course. All right. Some of the guiding principles. Of course, I kind of mentioned Americans with Disabilities Act, barrier free, all that. We're the lead agency, county OEM, a lot of supporting agencies. Again, I mentioned the CMIS principles, kind of helps you to remember things when you use these acronyms, but I do spell them out. And under some of those examples, communication, we mentioned some sign language earlier, different forms of communication, different languages. So trying to send out alerts, multilingual. Again, partnerships, that's why you're here today, trying to share and partner together. Maintaining health. I mentioned the backup power part. Independence, kind of mentioned that. Support and safety. And then as far as transportation too, that's a very big one in our county. We're rural, that's a rural county. Some of the socioeconomic status, it's fairly poor, especially in a lot of parts. So transportation is always a big deal. A lot of times it's as simple but effective as neighbor helping neighbor, and thank God for that. Or like local church groups and stuff. So one of the pieces of work I have yet to do, and I was talking to one of my partners back there, Carrie, a little bit earlier. I talked to Leslie a few days back over at COAD. I was trying to get MOUs and stuff set up. That's the tough part of it. So I can write plans all day and have thoughts and stuff, but it's just carrying out that piece. So again, if we can get some of these worked out, it's going to be, I think, more effective and a better outcome or end state for the residents. And that's what we aim to do, to help protect their health and safety. Next up, exercises, training, and drills. They're necessary and important. Sometimes people roll their eyes and they're like, oh, no, But if you plan them out, they are important. Obviously, you have to do them. And if you plan them out well in advance, get that coordination going, I think you'll have very good results. And a big reason we do them, same thing in the military and the civilian world, you want to make the mistakes now in training versus when the stuff hits the fan, so to speak, right? When it gets really bad, you don't want to be making mistakes in the real event. Make the mistakes in training, learn from them, get them corrected, do another training, 6 months later or whatever, and hopefully you got it right. You're like, hey, we made these mistakes last time. We didn't make them this time. We did that very well. So some of the appendices for that is going to be the MOUs I mentioned, which is the tough part, map of the population, evacuation routes, which I'm not really going to bore you with. And then this is actually from the meeting I worked on it July 3rd. The meeting was in July 3rd, but we had a meeting a couple weeks before that, and I had some time on July 3rd, so I really started knocking out. So again, the CMIS, again, acronym, there's everything. We listed a lot of the agencies. You guys heard some of that. Some of you guys might even be in the room. SPCA mentioned, probation. A lot of your county offices, we look for maybe even colleges and universities to partner with, just a whole list. I mentioned the messaging systems. We would use social media. Our website I mentioned for the county OEM. Didn't mention yet, but radio stations, that's another. So we're just looking to get the word out about, ahead of time about being prepared if there's going to be a disaster about to hit. And then as well as I heard some presenters earlier too, mentioning donations. You don't want to turn people away because out of the goodness of their heart, maybe they have, a dirty, beat up old baby crib, but they heard that's needed. So God bless them for doing that. You might just, okay, thank you or whatever. But then, if it's not safe or whatever, then you'll have to do what you have to do. But it's just donation management is a big deal though. So hopefully stuff that's brought in is serviceable, able to be used and relevant. So one of the things you could do ahead of time on donation management is again, have the word out through social media, radio and such about the needed items, right? That way you're just not getting an uncontrolled flow of all this stuff, which is nice, but it's like, is it what the community really needs? So just managing that. The OFA uses a system called Blooming Health Notification System, seems to be very effective. So that's good. So I just listed a whole bunch of the ways to do that. I mentioned iPause earlier, Code Red, New York Alert, which I showed you guys. So a lot of ways to get the information out. Maintaining health. Again, I'm not going to read off all this. Let you guys kind of read to it a little bit. So just some planning factors. We're trying to think ahead. Medicines are going to be a tricky one, especially if it has to be refrigerated. So again, a good example with that plug-in power station. I mentioned CPAP, etc. Big thing here, partnering is key. I'm still currently updating and creating my list of lists, so to speak. So if I can't do it or don't know directly, then I know a person who can. So that's kind of what another realm of emergency managers, what we do. Adaptive equipment, wheelchairs, walkers, etc. Some other partners. I don't think I have mine, or I could add that. Thank you. Again, this is why we go through it. So this is still draft, not approved yet. Mentioned the transportation, that's a big one. We do have a little airport over in Wellsville. Hopefully, wouldn't need to bring stuff in quite through that, but it is possible. Then at the end, I pretty much mentioned, keeping daily logbooks, receipts. As we know, in the medical field, there's a saying: if it wasn't written down, it wasn't done. Right? It's not just the medical field; it's a lot of things. So, keep your logs, receipts, etc. I'm not sure if you guys have taken ICS before at all, Incident Command System. So there's the 200 series of forms. He's shaking his head. He's like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "Yep." So those forms, sometimes at first you're rolling your eyes or painting that, but it's like, hey, it could save you later. It's legal document. It helps create the incident action plan. It's good stuff. So it's out there. That's what we use. It works. It's effective. So it's proven product. I kind of raced through it. So I'm still a little bit over on time. I apologize. I'll take any questions that you guys might have. No? I know I rushed through it. There's different techniques. I kind of pretty much said you're gonna be a part of this no matter what, because if not, you're gonna get asked for it. It's a technique. I wasn't mean about it. I smiled and I kind of, just be assertive. I said, hey, I'm really looking to help people. I'm the new guy, but I do see a gap here already. Again, I'm not putting anybody under the bus because I'm way far from perfect. I make mistakes. I don't make the greatest plans. I strive to. Hopefully they're getting better. Hopefully they're pretty good. But I fell in on some good stuff. Some of them, like the AFN plan, this stuff's brand new to us. There was none in existence. So from the ground up. So to answer your question, John, I just met with a lot of the different department heads. Started with the county administrator, and then with Brooke and the chair of the board, and then just meeting the other directors and saying, hey, I'm the new guy in the block. Here's what I'm trying to do to help. Here's my understanding your role of what you normally do in it, and let's try to work together. And you let me know, and I'll do the other work to make this more effective. Because if not, I'm going to be coming to you for resources anyways. So it's almost like going to mom and dad and being like, hey, Joey won't share his toys with us, and we need help over it, But all jokes aside, it's been working pretty well so far. Everybody wants to help, I think, and it's been pretty good. So
do you see the COAD as being a good partner in this process then?
I see it as being a wonderful partner because, we need you guys. We really do. In the military is a term we call them like combat multipliers, or this isn't combat, but mission or enablers, right? I need your guys' help. Again, there was somebody mentioned money earlier. We can't move money quickly. Some of you guys can, and it's all legal and stuff, obviously, but it is, there's, it's a process where you guys can really get through some of the stuff really quickly. And I mentioned, I met with Leslie last week from COAD, and I was like, hey, I didn't show you guys, but I've also developed annexes. There's a lot of different annexes for like donation management. As I mentioned earlier, I tried to keep it to one page. And then for another annex too is like fatality management, trying to keep it to one page, because again, you won't remember this stuff. I want to have stuff that's effective and executable and adaptable and flexible. Again, I don't want to write a dissertation. But effectiveness, I think, is the key, and getting it out and be like, hey, I have the basics, and but yeah, donation management, that's going to be huge potentially in the disaster. And then again, potentially setting up either the DAC at the local level, disaster assistance center, and then possibly disaster recovery center. But the work you guys do is tremendous. I can't do it. I would try. I'd be working 24/7 and still not get it done. But I do need your guys' help. We need your help, and we're looking to partner. But again, thanks for what you guys do, and you can help us to do it better and be a part. So, yeah, yes, sir. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? All right, try not to be. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay.
As we wrap up, I just want to say this is just the beginning of the conversation, I think. But I want to recognize Sue McCauley for putting all this together. She really was the driver behind this concept and very much involved in every step of the way. So, and she's on her way up here, so she's got something to say.
Yes, I do. I do have something to say. So we're all done. We've taken a look. In case you don't know me, I'm Sue. I'm from the United Way of Cattaraugus and Allegany Counties. We've taken a look. Thank to our speakers for giving us the foundation for one of this. Now it's time for us to get to work. So I want to let you know the next steps in the process. In January of 2026, we're going to bring everybody back together again. And our first order of business is to structure a COAD for Allegany and Cattaraugus counties. We're going to look at how to fund this process. And we're going to look at that asset matrix that Melissa referred to. And we're going to start putting this all together and getting organized. We're going to have information out on our website. uwcac.org/COAD is where we're going to be posting the information about the meetings and about the COAD. In the meantime, I'm going to encourage you all to do 3 things. 1, you've heard about 211 and how important 211 is. Please make sure that your agency's information is updated with the 211 system. Kelly Dodd from 211 of New York is here. Thank you, Kelly, for connecting us with the COAD. She's brought some information about 211 and we welcome you to take it home with you. Second, take a look at your agency's own emergency planning, dust it off, update it, make sure that you're prepared in case of an emergency. I took a look at ours and I'm embarrassed to admit that I hadn't dusted it off since 2021. And for all of you who know United Way, we've been through just a couple of changes over the past few years. So yeah, it's time to update that. And then just from a personal point, encourage your employees to plan for emergencies. I had quite the experience back in September, and I had my eyes open to how quickly everything can change. My neighbor lost their house, and I came home to see a burned out Hulk next door. So it can happen to you. It came awful close to me. So encourage your employees to be prepared for something like that. You know, do they know where their insurance is? Do they know where their birth certificates are? Be prepared. That's it for me.
Okay.
I'll turn it back over to Larry. I think I've said enough, but thank you all for coming today and participating.
Thanks, thanks everyone. Thank you. Thank you for your patience as we went through the agenda. I just want to make note that this is actually our 1-year anniversary of the Nonprofit Hub, and we thrive only when you tell us what you need. So please, if you have any thoughts for 2026 on topics, seminars that we can research for you, we'll be very happy to have that conversation. In the meantime, have a great Thanksgiving. Grab some food on your